The Prime Minister reacts to the referendum outcome ahead tonight. Why he says it wasn't a gamble.
How much time a judge gives a man who stabbed his victim 17 times.
And high school basketball championships could all be over soon. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This segment of the news is brought to you by BTC, powered by Lime.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Kendino Knowles. Well, Prime Minister Perry Christie says the government is prepared for whatever decision the court makes when it comes to web shop operations.
Our Charisma Robinson tells us more about Mr. Christie's initial reaction to the outcome of last week's gaming referendum.
The Prime Minister admitted to reporters before today's cabinet meeting that he was surprised by the outcome of last week's national referendum on gaming, with the majority of Bahamians voting no.
I thought it would be a much closer election, but you know, I was prepared for any outcome, and I tried to evidence that. The matter is before the courts now, so really I'm not going to speak to that issue, but we are prepared even for whatever decision is made at the court.
Despite what others may believe, Mr. Christie says the government made no mistakes with holding that referendum.
You never make mistakes when you are deepening a democracy. I promised before the elections that I would have a referendum. I indicated I had no horse in the race. It swirled with controversy. It was what it was. The people voted. I acted upon the vote. Now I don't have the province of it. It's a matter now for the Minister for National Security and the Attorney General.
And after last week's outcome, Mr. Christie could not say whether the question of casino gambling would be put to Bahamians in the upcoming constitutional referendum. He says that's an issue for the Constitutional Commission.
When I do appear before the Commission, I will be able to speak on behalf of the government and give a point of view as to those areas of the Constitution that are of interest to us as a government in the light of our own experiences in governance.
Now, Mr. Christie says elements of public education will be slightly different this time around, as the Commission is currently conducting consultations with the various stakeholders on issues to be tackled.
We will be able to initiate a public relations program that is intended to ensure that every single Bahamian who would have an interest in knowing what is happening will have that information made available to them.
The Prime Minister says the government will definitely have a horse in the race. He will appear before the Commission sometime before it wraps up its hearings. Charisma Robinson, ZNS Network News.
Now, when the Vote No campaign returned to its prayer site last night, it was to give God thanks for answered prayers. Scores of supporters joined in a time of worship, reflecting on what many thought was the unlikely outcome of the gaming referendum.
Well, last evening, the group gathered in Rawson Square to celebrate the overwhelming no vote. Andrew Knowles joins us now. Andrew, you have more from that event.
Yes, Kendino and Keishla. Well, quite a number of people turned out in the city square last evening to give God thanks for the outcome of the January 28th gaming referendum. And even in the face of a court injunction, which allows the status quo to remain for now, Save Our Bahamas believes the battle goes beyond the courts.
Tonight, we want to give God the praise, and even though the battle is not finished, and even though there are those who would seek to frustrate the will of the Bahamian people, hear me well, Bahamas. They are not battling against the pastors. They're not battling against the churches. They're not even battling against the will of the Bahamian people. For we have invoked the Lord our God, and they are battling against Jehovah Jireh. They are battling against the one who is able to save by many or by few.
It was a direct hit by Pastor Lyle Bethel, apparently at web shop bosses. They held hands in prayer and sang in worship. Rawson Square became the backdrop for a victory celebration. Dozens of Bahamians turned out Monday evening to thank God for delivering the country from regulating web shop gaming, stressing that games with chance have become a pastime that would do more damage than good. Bahamas Christian Council President Reverend Ranford Patterson was among the pastors in attendance.
Payment people already spoken, and that's it. We have done our job as Save the Bahamas. We have done what we set out to do. It's up now to the Attorney General and the government to do what they have to do. We have done our part, and we are thankful to God for showing us and showing the world that Bahamians still believe that God is their supply.
It was a struggle for us, but we knew from the beginning the church would have come out victorious, because you cannot beat the church. Because Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it.
No matter the outcome of the court battle, Save Our Bahamas intends to hold the Prime Minister's feet to the fire. He has said he'll be guided by the will of the people.
If the court determines that it is legal, then we expect the government to pass legislation to make it illegal. If the court determines that it's illegal, then we expect that the government would continue to, in its efforts to close the web shops and restore law and order in the country.
Now, Pastor Stewart says one good thing arising from this referendum is that it's awakened the church. And now that it's been awakened, he said he is sure that the church will be more vocal on other national issues.
In our first look at weather, we have a very weak front system approaching the northwest Bahamas, but outside of our studios, we have a temperature of 73 degrees with near clear skies, just a few clouds floating around, relative humidity 65%, winds out of the east at 5 knots, your barometric pressure of 1,017.0 millibars, that's 30.03 inches, and it is steady. But stay tuned, we still have temperatures around the Family of Islands, travel and boating forecasts still to come.
Thanks, Basil. Well, a magistrate has convicted Melvin Maycock Sr. and his son Melvin Jr. of escape and abetment to escape. You may recall that after Maycock Sr. was captured by police, he escaped lawful custody by bribing a police officer and allowing his son Melvin Jr. to take his place in a cell at the Elizabeth Estates Police Station back in 2009. Magistrate Darren Roll Davis will sentence Maycock and his son on February 20th. Meantime, Maycock Sr. is also serving a 3-year prison sentence after being convicted in a 2008 drug and firearm case.
A senior Supreme Court judge has sentenced a former law enforcement officer to 40 years in prison for committing a brutal murder almost 4 years ago following a domestic dispute.
However, as Fern Carey tells us, the convict won't have to serve that entire sentence.
40-year-old former prison officer Jerome Bethel stood emotionless in court as Senior Justice John Isaacs sentenced him to 39 years and 4 months in prison for killing his former girlfriend's boyfriend, 49-year-old North Andros resident Harold Gardner, almost 4 years ago following an argument. At the same time, Bethel's relatives could not hold back their tears and cries of apparent shock at the stiff sentence. Before a sentence was passed, however, the probation officer described Bethel as a quiet, non-problematic individual who maintains that he acted in self-defense and, as a result, showed no remorse for his actions. In his plea in mitigation, Bethel's attorney Murray DeSeal reminded the court that Bethel was an outstanding father of 5 who tried to lead a productive life despite a previous brush with the law. And despite the mitigating circumstances surrounding Gardner's death, DeSeal said Bethel is extremely remorseful and not beyond redemption. He stressed that not every case where an individual is convicted of a serious offense warrants an eye for an eye or a pound of flesh. Nevertheless, Justice Isaacs said Bethel had not shown any remorse until after the trial, and he described Gardner's death as a horrific crime, noting that he was stabbed 17 times about the body and some of the stab wounds were 3 to 4 inches deep. And while he did not consider the case the worst of the worst or something that warrants the death penalty, Justice Isaacs said the sentence must be an expression of society's abhorrence of such crimes and a deterrent to those who may attempt to copy that behavior. He then sentenced Bethel to 40 years in prison. Now, Bethel will only serve 39 years and 4 months because of the 8 months he has already spent awaiting trial. Now his attorney, Mario DeSille, has indicated that he will appeal the sentence. Fern Carey, ZNS Network News.
The decision on whether Cable Bahamas will be granted a 27% price hike is imminent. The Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority was supposed to announce its decision before the end of January. However, that did not happen. ORCA Director of Policy and Regulation Stephen Barrow telling ZNS News today that the decision was unavoidably delayed and will be released as soon as possible. Now, we understand the decision could come by the end of the week, almost 4 months since Cable Bahamas submitted its request.
Minister of Labor and National Insurance Shane Gibson has responded to a recent request made by former city markets workers for the government to pay out a portion of their benefits then settle with the company. The former city markets workers are up in arms over unpaid severance and pension funds. They claim the defunct company still owes them.
We have not made a decision on that, but that is a very difficult thing to do, because really what you would be doing is taking on the responsibility of the former company who terminated their services. And I don't know that we should begin to set a precedent where we just decide to take on the responsibilities of the private sector in that way. And so even though the decision hasn't been made yet, that's going to be a very difficult one based on their request.
Now, Mr. Gibson also gave an update on the dispute between Elizabeth Thompson and the Bahamas telecommunications company, BTC. Ms. Thompson was elected as Bahamas Communications and Public Managers Union president last October 4th and was terminated on October 22nd without cause. However, BTC officials are maintaining that Thompson won't be reinstated as a company employee due to a conflict of interest.
Finalized a position that we sent over to management, I think it was last week or week before last. They had asked us to put a recommendation together and send it to them for their consideration. We did that within the past 2 weeks. And so hopefully they should be getting back to us pretty soon as to whether or not they agree with our position. What we did is we look at several case precedents that we thought would help them in making a decision as to how they could settle this matter once and for all.
The Prime Minister says he's concerned about crime in the country. Find out what he plans to do about it coming up.
And the Queen's College Comets could be poised for the history books. Their senior boys on the verge of winning the country's first basketball championship. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Sun Oil Limited, fueling growth for people.